Hey guys, Corey Matthew here, also known as the Unprofessional Punk, and today I'm a little late on this, but I want to discuss a review for Terrifier 3 and some of the controversy surrounding the movie. The Terrifier series can be challenging for me to review. This is a series that I love, but I know why individuals are often not the biggest fans of this series. I've now seen both Terrifier 2 and 3 opening weekend. While Terrifier 2 is still my favorite so far in the franchise, Terrifier 3 was fantastic, ramping up the gore and giving us some more story. The Terrifier series has never been the best when it comes to story, especially the first one, but I feel like with the start of the second installment in the series, we began to learn more about Art the Clown. I'm glad this series mainly uses practical effects and very little CGI from what I've read about and researched. The Terrifier series it always seems to pay a homage to the 1980s slasher film, which is personally like my favorite decade for horror movies, including Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all of those movies. Now, I want to discuss because there has been a growing discourse. Now, I believe that it's kind of died down a little bit, but the discourse I would like to discuss here is whether or not children dying in horror movies is okay. And I have been a huge horror fan since I was about 13 years old, starting my obsession with horror with Nightmare on Elm Street, the 1984 Wes Craven version. And this is funny to me because Freddy Krueger was known for killing kids, but it was never on screen. However, Terrifier 3 has two scenes that show kids dying in pretty gruesome ways. While they're not on screen for a very long time, I know as someone who enjoys horror movies, I also have my limits when it comes to seeing stuff depicted in horror movies. Usually anything depicting SA or intentional self-harm. I usually don't count people getting possessed or hurting themselves, like Smile. Smile never really bugged me because I saw it as someone is getting possessed and they are not in control of their actions. It's the actions are being taken by the possession. So, but, seeing kids die in horror movies is very hit and miss, even for me sometimes. I don't mind when they show it. Seeing kids die in horror movies and even other movie genres has been around for decades. Think back to It, Chapter 1, the opening scene with Georgie, where in the 2019 remake of it, they actually showed, Georgie getting his arm torn off, which is more accurate to the book, while in the 1990s TV series, they actually just had a cutaway, like they didn't show anything. So when looking at that, another Stephen King adaptation I also like to look at is Pet Sematry's plot, which is about a father bringing his son back to life using the Pet Sematary. They, again, don't show it, but you know that kid got hit by a car, and, that is still can be very hard to watch. But as I mentioned earlier, Nightmare on Elm Street about Freddy Krueger who killed kids. And the only horror icon that doesn't kill kids is Jigsaw from the Saw series. They kind of tackled that in Saw 10 of having a kid be forced to join a saw trap. And then another one would be, Chucky tries to kill Andy. Michael Myers has killed a kid on screen. I believe it was the Halloween 2018 reboot kind of the franchise that had that kill. And I believe also Jason has also tried to kill kids. So kids in horror movies have always been a part of the genre. And kids dying just in the media has been there. I'm not trying to be a dead horse. I'm just trying to say that this has been around. Even my most recent hyper-focused Game of Thrones, that was one of the most popular TV series of the 2010s, and no one had an issue with them killing kids and implying that kids had died, among other things. I understand that Terrifier 3 was a little more brave in showing the aftermath of children's death, and that is not what everyone wants to see, but even as a horror fan, it's okay not to see every single horror movie out there. With, Terrifier 3, movies like Midsommar, Hereditary, and Pet Sematary are movies I've seen once and respect, but I do not want to watch them again. Those movies got to me with some of the content that is depicted in that. I actually won't watch The Autopsy of Jane Doe because of the cat dying, but again, I respect it. I even skipped one scene in Smile because for me, it was too hard to watch. And as I mentioned before, I couldn't watch The Autopsy of Jane Doe because of the cat passing away. So you can only imagine what scene in Smile got to me once it started playing out. I have my reasons why I especially don't like seeing cats die or any animal in general. I am a huge animal lover. Oftentimes, I spend my Saturday afternoons volunteering at a cat shelter, and it's one of the most self-care things I do. I don't like seeing things depicted as innocent, so animals and children. I see like this innocence to it, so I don't like seeing them get traumatized. But I also believe that things shouldn't get banned in horror movies. I think that if you know something in a piece of media is going to make you uncomfortable, it's okay that you choose not to watch it. Terrifier is a series that is not for everyone, and that is okay. I'm glad that a purely independent horror film was dominating the box office and getting a new horror icon out there that is just as iconic as Freddy, Jason, Chucky, Michael, and so on. And kind of the last big horror icon, to my knowledge, to come out was really the Saw series back in 2004. Unless you include The Conjuring, which did give us Annabelle, it gave us The Nun, but for me, like, Art the Clown really fits in that kind of Freddy Krueger, Jason, Chucky, Jigsaw category in my eyes. And I know the two scenes depicting child death in Terrifier 3 is a little hard to watch, especially the opening scene. The opening scene even shocked me a little bit, because at least with the mall scene, you kind of couldn't tell. That one was more implied that kids die without showing anything, and when they did show, you couldn't tell if it was an adult or a child, but in the opening scene, you can definitely tell it was a young boy, and, you know, at least they don't go on it for too long, and so on. And when looking at that and seeing people get kind of, you know, saying that, you know, Terrifier 3 is, you know, maybe too extreme, for you, yes, but to other people, you know, like me who loves the Terrifier series, you know, it's just a movie, it's just to have fun. And the fact that you're kind of pointing fingers at this movie, but not looking at the wide category of other pieces of media that weren't afraid to show child death. I mean, even looking at something like The Last of Us. Now, while Sarah was kind of more of a preteen, teenager, I want to put her in that category, that's still a hard scene to watch, and she's still a young person. So when looking at all this, you kind of have to think of, you have to be okay in knowing what you're watching and knowing what you're comfortable with. You know, my first time seeing a, you know, Terrifier, I was like, you know what? I know there's no story. I know it's stupid, but I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with Terrifier the first time around, and I was kind of, when I first got into Terrifier, it was really this movie that no one had heard of. It was like an indie film, and I ended up showing my fiance, I ended up showing a lot of friends it, being like, hey, here's this like kind of extreme horror movie that no one knows about just yet. And to my, fast forward to many years later, that now Art the Clown is in Spirit Halloween and has all these t-shirts. You know, I go into Spencer's now or Hot Topic and there's Art the Clown. You know, this is like kind of really amazing, and I think Terrifier 3 is up there with, you know, past horror icons, like I said. And I think just right now the 2020s for horror movies has been really good. From Smile to Abigail to the Fear Street series to Barbarian to Megan and so much more. I mean, we got Saw 10. depending on your feelings about it. I personally enjoyed the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. The moment I saw it had a PG-13 rating, I was a little bit like, iffy about it. And I was like, a video, I grew up in the era of where if you knew a video game was getting adapted, you're like, it's an automatic bad movie, looking back at the Mortal Kombat movies and all of that of the early 2000s. But now seeing it, now that we're, looking at it as, video game movies are actually showing some success and getting better. You had Uncharted, which from mostly what I've heard are good things about Uncharted. And then even looking at the TV side of things, you have The Last of Us TV show, which is also doing amazing. Getting ready for season 2. Five Nights at Freddy's was kind of just one of those movies that, I actually ended up liking, and I had the lowest of lowest expectations for that movie. So, but this is just some of my thoughts I had about Terrifier 3, and now the controversy of whether or not kids should be depicted as dying or getting killed in horror movies. You have to look at it, one, all movies are fake. The kid is always okay. The actor playing the kid is always going to be okay. And, you also have to take this as, the biggest advice I can give you is if someone is making fun of you because there is a certain piece of media you can't watch because, say, it triggers a mental health or maybe just something that you went through or just something you can't handle, then don't watch it. Be okay. There are resources out there for you to look up movies and be like, okay, is this something I can watch? I believe the website's called Does the Dog Die? And it's a really good website. I've even used it when I went to go see Smile 2 because, like I said, I struggle with any depictions of self-harm. I had seen the previous Smile. I just wanted to be careful. So I even looked up, on that website and said, okay, what are some of the things that are depicted in Smile 2? And I saw okay, there's not much, that's gonna bug me. So I went and saw it in theaters, and I'm really glad I did see Smile 2 in theaters. But, like I said, it's one of those things. And also what's good about this website is the fact that they don't give you any spoilers unless you really look into them. But most of the time, it will have a category of, does the dog die? And then in another box, it will say yes. Or it will say no. And then they'll do other things with it. They'll do, warn you if there's SA. If there's SA in the movie, they'll be like, yes or no. If there's substance use, they say yes or no if you struggle with seeing substance use on the screen. So there are resources out there. Please use them when watching media. Don't trigger yourself watching a movie like something like this. And like I said, if it's something not even down your alley, just don't watch it. That's perfectly okay. Even as me, a horror buff who has probably seen 300 horror movies by this point, there are some that I will either not watch and avoid, or there's movies I'll watch once and never again. I respect them. I see why they were critically acclaimed, but that's just stuff I cannot watch, especially anything really with animals. Animals is another big part of me being I can't watch Old Yeller. I refuse to watch Old Yeller. I know the ending of Old Yeller. I am not watching it. I'm not putting myself through that as an animal lover. And that's just kind of thing. Just avoid what you don't want to watch. Use a website like Does the Dog Die? And you'll be good, But, yeah. And last point is that I'm really glad that Terrifier 3 is doing so successful and that we have a franchise like this again in horror. It does feel like the 1980s where we're getting all these horror icons again, and I'm glad Art the Clown is up there. So thank you again for anyone who listened to this. I hope you guys have a great day, and the holiday season is approaching, so I hope you have a happy holidays. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.